do is get as many organisations on board as possible to share our messaging with their networks. So we are recording this webinar, and we'll be sending the link out to partners to share, and so that hopefully we can capture as many questions as possible today. We've developed assets as well, so we've done visuals and things like that with basic facts on. Anything that you think we're missing, let us know, we can create them. We're also going to be doing a guide, a basic guide of how organisations can meet these regulations and what they need to do internally in terms of waste segregation and recycling. And waste minimisation, as I said, is the key to this. We can come and speak at events. So if you have an existing event with networks of businesses and organisations, we can come in and talk about simpler recycling and what organisations need to do. If you've got any really good case studies of what you've done within your organisations in terms of waste minimisation and segregation, anything around food waste, we'd love to hear it, and we can do lovely case studies so that people can learn from best practice. We're really looking for you to help share this with your networks. So this will work if we're blown away by the support we've had already. We've got Federation of Small Business on board, CBI, NGI, I mean, there's acronym tastic, and we've got loads of organisations partnering already, but we're always looking for more, because the more organisations share this and point people to the information that they need, the more businesses will be ready in time for the 31st of March. And if you want to support the campaign, we've already got some fantastic sponsorship through J&B Recycling, AluPro, and Suez and Olive Compliance so far. So we're pulling together just a basic budget to help us spread the message even further, and that's the way we're going. So if you are interested in badging any of our resources, you can put your logo on there and share them with your network as well. So we just wanted to do this in a really cost-effective way, as efficiently as possible, by all working together. So it's quite exciting. It's that we can spread the message as much as possible. So that's just to give you a bit of background. I'll stop sharing now and allow our first speaker to come and give you some actual facts, and I'll go and cough in the background. Thank you.
So,
great, thanks, Jen.
Aaron, if you can take over, please.
Yep,
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah, thanks both. Yeah, so I'm from DEFRA, working on simpler recycling, and I'll just kind of give a quick introduction into kind of what the reforms look like and the types of changes that you'll need to be making in your workplace. Yeah, and hopefully we can take some questions as well. So just to kind of summarise at the start, so currently, as you'll be aware, for businesses and non-domestic premises in England, there's no requirement to separate recycling or food waste. And that's one of the key changes that simpler recycling will introduce from next year. So from the 31st of March 2025, all businesses that have more than 10 full-time equivalents will need to separate the core recyclable materials of plastic, metal, glass, paper and card, and food waste from the residual waste streams. And then we have a slightly later implementation date of the 31st of March 2027 for microfirms. So those are organisations that have less than 10 full-time employees. And that's the organisation as a whole rather than per premise. So, for example, if you had a business with 15 full-time employees, but you had 3 different premises with 5 each, you wouldn't be covered by the microfirm exemption. So it's for the organisation as a whole where that kind of exemption is in place. Then just the next slide kind of briefly provides an overview of the types of sectors and workplaces that are impacted by the reforms. It's an exhaustive list, but just gives you an idea of the types of premises that will be brought into the new recycling requirements. And I've also provided a brief outline of the other stakeholders that are kind of critical to ensuring that the reforms are a success. So we have the private waste collectors and local authorities, obviously, have a key role in terms of setting up the waste collections and making their customers aware of the new requirements and what they'll need to be separating. We have the Environment Agency, who are the regulator for simpler recycling. So they will be responsible for monitoring compliance and taking any enforcement action where appropriate. And I have a slide that will cover that in more detail later in the pack. And then trade associations and other organisations that are going to help us get the message out there to the kind of key workplaces that are being affected by the reforms. So now I wanted to touch on kind of what simple recycling might look like for you. So you'll hopefully be aware that after a period of unfortunately not being able to provide much communication due to the change of government, having to kind of reconfirm some of the policies, on the 29th of November, we were able to publish kind of a policy update on simple recycling, which confirmed some of the exemptions we had around the co-collection materials. And this essentially confirmed that plastic, metal, and glass can by default be co-collected in a single container. And it also confirmed that by default, paper and card should be collected as a separate waste stream. That's because by separating that material at source, it kind of leads to higher environmental benefits, and it kind of maintains the quality of the recyclate so that it can be properly recycled. That's not to say when it's commingled that it is not recyclable, just that the quality is higher when it's kept separate from the other materials. And then we also confirmed that food waste and garden waste can be co-collected. Obviously, garden waste is probably less relevant for workplaces, so there's no requirement to separate garden waste for workplaces. But obviously, where you do generate it, then you do have a duty within kind of the waste hierarchy and taking consideration of how garden waste should be properly disposed of. So that's the default. But we also confirmed that there would be an exemption where a waste collector can undertake a co-collection assessment to demonstrate that it's not technically or economically practicable or of no significant environmental benefit to have paper and card as a separate waste stream. So in those instances, you would be able to collect paper and card with the other waste streams in one container. So that would kind of leave you having three bins in this situation. So you have one for dry mix recycling, one for food waste, and one for your residual waste. And that co-collection assessment is for the waste collector to undertake based on their kind of practices and their customer base. It wouldn't be for the workplace to undertake on an individual basis. So I've kind of outlined on this slide some of the criteria that would need to be demonstrated for that co-collection assessment. So technical kind of barriers might be around like the space in depots or the space for additional bins. And then economic might be around kind of the cost to set up new, to purchase new vehicles to facilitate that collection of paper and card separately. And then environment. So if you're able to demonstrate, for example, that additional paper and card collections might result in higher carbon emissions from additional vehicles. And if, for example, that there's not a high enough demand for paper and card that kind of the truck couldn't be full, then that's obviously a case for it not being environmentally beneficial to have a separate paper and card collection. So then I've kind of briefly outlined some of the steps that you'll need to think about in your workplace. So the first is check if you need to make any changes. It might be that you're already separating your recyclables and food waste, in which case you're probably already compliant and therefore we don't need to make changes. But if you aren't, then you'll want to do kind of a review of the types of waste that you're generating. So for example, you might identify that you do produce really high volumes of paper and card, and therefore it does make sense to have that collected more frequently or separately to other materials. And that's kind of something for you to assess, but also to have a conversation with your waste collector. Then based on kind of the services you have now and what you will need to have from your relevant implementation date, you'll need to set up those new collections with your chosen waste collector. And then once your service is in place, it'll be really important to educate your staff and, if applicable, your customers to make sure they understand how to engage with the new services and kind of dispose of the materials in the right bin. Because obviously if the materials are highly contaminated, then you're at risk of your waste collector not refusing to collect the materials or kind of charging you for landfill disposal rather than recycling. And then lastly, keeping track of your recycling and food waste. So it's not a mandatory requirement to monitor, but we are suggesting it's a good idea because you'll be able to monitor how much waste you're generating, and you might, for example, identify that as more of your material is going to recyclable or food waste bins, you might be able to reduce your residual waste collection frequency or the size, like the volume of container, which would hopefully kind of reduce the costs incurred to you as a workplace. So yeah, it's good to monitor those things and kind of optimize your service as much as possible. The other thing I wanted to touch on in detail is around the food waste requirements. So there's been a bit of confusion. Unfortunately, that's slightly due to us not being able to communicate some of the changes as quickly as we would have liked. But in Wales, there's a de minimis for food waste of 5 kilos per premises. In England, the legislation doesn't have this de minimis, so all food waste generated by the kind of activities and the people in your workplace would need to be separated regardless of the volume. But then it's important for you as a workplace to consider then the frequency and the size of container you need for that. So if you only have a small kind of staff kitchen area, you might just be generating kind of things like tea bags and kind of leftovers from people's lunches. You might only need, say, like a 5 or 10 litre caddy that's collected every 2 weeks. So that's kind of in contrast to the household requirements, which is for a weekly food waste collection. Yeah, and so the food waste requirements apply regardless of whether you have kind of catering facilities. So the food waste requirements aren't just for, if you have a canteen or if you're serving food in, say, a restaurant or cafe, it's for all premises. Then just on compliance and enforcement. So this kind of briefly outlines the process that the Environment Agency would go through if they were looking to kind of investigate a business or a waste collector. So in the first instance, if they identified a waste collector or a waste producer as being non-compliant, they would start with advice and guidance. So obviously we're aware of the delays that have kind of happened with simple recycling, and now the kind of the shortened window for businesses to comply, for workplaces to comply. So we in the Environment Agency are very much aware that we need to take like a pragmatic approach to enforcement and make sure that we're in the first instance providing advice and guidance and helping waste collectors and waste producers to understand the changes that need to be made, rather than kind of immediately going straight to taking enforcement action. So then if that advice and guidance was ignored and the waste collector or waste producer continued to kind of not comply with the legislation, in that instance, a compliance notice would kind of be formally served to that waste collector or waste producer, and that would essentially be like a written kind of warning in essence to say, like, we've identified you as non-compliant. You now need to take take remediation action to ensure you're compliant. Then if that compliance notice was ignored, then the offender would be at risk of being taken for having legal action taken against them in line with the Environment Agency's enforcement policy. Obviously, that is quite the Environment Agency would have to demonstrate that it's a significant offence has been committed. And hopefully the Environment Agency will be submitting or making public more guidance soon on kind of what their enforcement approach will look like over the kind of coming year and throughout the implementation of simpler recycling over the coming years. So I just really want to stress that point, that the Environment Agency are in the first instance here to help workplaces and waste collectors to comply. We're not looking to penalise anyone for particularly any issues you have around like procuring services, or where a waste collector might not have been able to procure like new trucks or bin infrastructure in time. It's definitely not the case that on the 1st of April someone will be coming to the door and kind of taking legal action immediately. So I want to reassure kind of this group on that. And then last thing, I just wanted to speak very briefly about some of the support that we're making available. So we're currently finalising our plans for social media messaging using the DEFRA kind of presence on LinkedIn and other social media pages. We're also attending webinars and hopefully setting up our own webinars, so such as this, to try and get the message out there. Attending conferences in person, and also hopefully in due course publishing a toolkit of resources to help waste collectors workplaces to communicate the changes. And we're really keen to get feedback from our key stakeholders on this. So I'll pop our kind of shared inbox in the chat once I've finished speaking. So we welcome feedback on what support would be appreciated from your organisation, and yeah, if you're aware of any kind of conferences or other events that we should be attending to get the message out there, that's really welcome. And then yeah, Bruce is on the call, and I know he's going to be speaking after me, so I won't touch too much on this, but we've also funded the Business of Recycling website, which is currently live. And that has various resources like step-by-step and sector-specific guidance to help you, and some posters as well, and other kind of templates and guides. So there's a lot of really useful tools on there that are readily available, free to access, will hopefully kind of help in communicating the changes and helping you understand the changes you need to make. And yeah, that's me. So I'll pause there. I don't know, Joe, if you'd like to do questions now or maybe wait to the end. I'm happy either way.
Should we go to questions now? I think just because we're slightly ahead of time, and I think it would make sense to cover off anything that people have specific to what you've just said, Aaron, and then we'll move on to Bruce's presentation. So can I ask if there are any questions, please? Just raise your hand.
There's quite a few in the chat.
Okay.
One of them is, are defence covered or do they have an exemption?
So yeah, defence at army bases are all in scope of the changes. So yeah, we've already had a few conversations with the Ministry of Defence to make sure that they're aware of the changes that they need to make.
Brilliant. And are there any additional support or exemptions for charities?
There aren't any exemptions. I'd be happy to pick up. We haven't provided specific kind of support to charities, but I'm happy to, if there's anything that you would appreciate, to take that away, and we can factor that into our kind of ongoing plan. Yeah, I'd be definitely interested to hear what you think would be helpful in that, Jeremy.
Right. Does it apply to places with no employees, just volunteers?
So if it's completely volunteer led, so there's no paid members of staff, then the requirements wouldn't apply. But yeah, I'm aware that obviously a lot of charities do have like an employed kind of leadership team or kind of organizational team that then work with volunteers. So in that instance, it would depend on the number of paid members of staff, whether they qualify for the microfirm exemption or not.
Brilliant. And then there's quite a long one here. I'd be keen to understand if there are any future plans to devolve enforcement powers to local authorities for non-compliance with separation of recycling.
Yeah, so no plans currently. We're just working with the Environment Agency. Obviously, it's not within the legislation that the local authorities have a power to enforce against waste collectors or non-domestic premises or businesses in that regard.
Okay.
I think there's a good question there, Joe, about what is the commercial building containing multiple businesses? This has been taxing me a little bit. So imagine you're a parade of shops, and there are 10 shops, and it's landlord, you're the tenants there, but each of the shops only employs maybe 5 people, but cumulatively across 10 shops, you've got 50 employees. How do the rules apply in that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to. It's more kind of scenario based. So like, I think the principle of the legislation is that where there are kind of more than 10 people operating in a space, then that shouldn't be exempt because it's about kind of the volume of waste. And where the landlord, obviously it would be for the landlord or management agency of that building to set up the necessary, assuming that all of the kind of businesses that operate in that space have a shared waste collection system, so they're not all operating their own, then it would be the case that the landlord has responsibility for ensuring kind of compliance and that they have the necessary services in place.
So there is an owner, the onus would come back to the landlord rather than the individual tenants.
Yeah, so there would be there is a responsibility for the individual businesses to ensure that they're compliant, so they can't or say if we're talking down the line when kind of enforcement action is being taken more prominently, a business couldn't kind of say we don't separate food waste or recyclables because our landlord hasn't provided that they do have responsibility as a business themselves to ensure they're compliant. But yeah, so it's kind of a shared responsibility in that sense.
By 2027, you know, small micro firms will be included as well. Yeah. Okay.
There was another question we got asked, not on here, but previously, was if an organisation has got I've got more than 10 employees, but they offer access to the general public. So this one particular organisation offered a park facility. Would they have to provide bins and collection segregated for the general public, not just their own waste?
Yeah, so it's any waste that's generated by the operation of the kind of premises that is in scope, and I should say any waste that's household-like in composition or nature, so kind of like the familiar materials and the recyclable waste streams. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and there's one on here about if an organisation wants to compost their own food waste on site, is that meeting the requirements?
Yeah, so that on-site composting is compliant. Obviously, for say like premises that are serving food, I know there is additional legislation around the handling of like animal byproducts that might inhibit the use of on-site composting. So it would be we do have a more kind of cleared line on that I can share after this. But yes, in principle, it is compliant to do kind of on-site composting.
Brilliant, thank you.
Any more questions before we move on? If there are no more questions, there are new messages. What's down there? Yeah.
Great, thanks.
That's
yeah,
fine. Okay, let's yeah, go on, Aaron. Sorry.
So I was just saying, I'll put my our shared inbox email in the chat. So happy to follow up with any additional questions after this.
Yeah, that'll be good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you can feed them through us as well, we can make sure they get answered for you.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So that then leads us on to Bruce from WRAP. You've got 10 minutes, Bruce.
No pressure, Jason. No, absolutely fine. I'm hoping that the slides are just coming up. If people can let me know just when that's going to appear.
Yep, they're there. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. No, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Bruce Rickey. I'm a senior specialist with the Waste and Resources Action Programme, WRAP. Just leading on from Aaron's presentation, I just wanted to cover off about business waste and the support that we can provide through the Business of Recycling website. Before I go on, just to go through the agenda, what I wanted to cover today, just to say that WRAP is a global environmental action NGO transforming product and food systems to create circular living. So that's our aim. And obviously we want to catalyse action from policymakers, businesses, NGOs and citizens to make it happen. In terms of today's presentation, what I wanted to cover off was obviously the impact to businesses, the policy aspirations and impact that sit behind this policy change, the guidance and tools that are available from WRAP, and obviously just give an overview of the Business of Recycling website and obviously the recycling tools and resources that are available for businesses as well. Obviously, the changes will affect businesses differently. Won't focus on micro businesses today. I think very much it's about those premises that have over 10 full-time equivalents. A number of premises that are out there already will have recycling in place and will be getting the benefits from that as well. Some of them, with the sort of recycling they have in place, will already be making savings as well by diverting that away, either from landfill or energy recovery. For some businesses that perhaps haven't segregated or separated waste before, the additionality of recycling will come potentially at a cost. So obviously what we've designed are a series of tools to really sort of help businesses through that process and secure best value for their services. It's also been recognised as well that there is not a direct correlation between the number of businesses and the amount of waste that's actually generated as well. And just this slide shows that obviously huge numbers of office-based premises, but actually producing in relative terms a fairly small amount of waste. But the flip of that is obviously in relation to things like hospitality and obviously the retail and wholesale sector as well. What we've been doing as well in recognition of that is designing sector-specific guidance for each of those areas. So 4 have been completed with the help of a number of advisory groups, and that covers retail, hospitality, health, and offices as well. And we're also developing sector-specific guidance now for education, transport and storage, and food manufacturing as well. As Aaron's touched upon, obviously there's significant sort of policy aspirations that sit behind this. Obviously household waste is an important element, but obviously there's a big opportunity in terms of actually recycling more of our non-household municipal waste. Obviously there's about 2.2 million businesses within England, and that takes account of obviously the micro businesses by 2027. And obviously there are a number of businesses out there that are already recycling, but at the moment that's around about 40%. So there's significant opportunities to increase NHM recycling. And the bottom part of that slide just shows the types of tonnes that we're talking about, well over 1 million tonnes for a number of those sectors, so a significant opportunity. In terms of our guidance and tools, we have obviously developed the Business of Recycling website. That hosts our tools and guidance, also hosts our business waste calculator, the sector guidance that I touched upon, and obviously our communication resources as well. What I'm going to take you through is just a sort of 5 key steps that we've outlined to support businesses through the simpler recycling journey. So step 1, very much why your business needs to recycle. The Business of Recycling website actually contains the legal responsibilities, obviously the current duty of care requirements, but obviously the new simpler recycling policy reforms outlined by Aaron as well. Obviously as well outlines why there's a case for recycling and obviously the benefits to the organisation, not only from a cost point of view, but also from a staff awareness perspective and also from a reputational perspective as well. And as some of the questions alluded to as well, it's not just about recycling. This is about looking at food waste hierarchies and waste hierarchies in general. As Joe touched upon, very much looking at waste minimisation, but also the reuse of materials as well going forward. The next step in terms of step 2 is very much about knowing your waste. Obviously for a lot of businesses, this will be the first time that they've really delved into this and really looking at how you can actually know your waste better through a waste action plan and obviously undertaking a waste audit. Getting to know what materials are in there, the volume of those materials, and obviously the outlets for those materials as well. Based on that waste audit and waste action plan, we then have the business waste calculator. This allows the business to actually input their data that they've obtained through the action plan and the audit, and really starts to generate a calculation of actually how much money could potentially be saved. Obviously, they're required to input that data, and it allows them to be informed in terms of not only the volume of waste, but the potential cost, so they can have that informed discussion either with the local authority or the private sector waste management company as well. In terms of step 4, this is very much sitting around about setting up recycling across your business. So based on those steps, it's then about looking about how you manage your waste, both internally and externally as well. And obviously from that perspective as well, it's then about procuring a service provider. What we've developed is guidance for both small and large organisations, and we've also developed a specification template as well that people can use. There's also tools as well to communicate with staff. Obviously, that the frontline staff are absolutely crucial in terms of ensuring that the waste is segregated at that first point and at that first stage as well. And step 5, obviously reviewing and improving the service. Once that service is up and running, are there opportunities to further reduce the volume through minimisation or reuse? Are there opportunities to reduce down the frequency of collection and therefore obviously saving further money as well? And obviously that engagement needs to be ongoing with employees, particularly where you've maybe got a high turnover of staff. It's about continuing that discussion with members of staff as well, and obviously involving them in the process and getting their ideas going forward as well. And in terms of the recycling resources that are out there, we have a range of how-to guides and instructional guides. We also have a range of case studies as well across the range of sectors that I described earlier. We obviously have those templates that I mentioned for the waste audit, the waste action plan, and a range of communication supports for staff engagement, as well as customer engagement through posters. We also have internet banners, PowerPoint presentation templates, and email footers as well. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Jason.
Does anybody have any questions for Bruce there? I've got one that I can throw in to start with, I think. I'm interested, Bruce, that you say there's never been a requirement, and this was said by Aaron as well. There's never been a requirement for businesses to recycle before now. But I'm also aware that when you sign your waste transfer notes with the waste contractor, you're signing to say that the waste hierarchy has been applied to your waste streams. So there kind of has been a requirement for people to make that declaration. I'm just interested to see what's the nuanced change of this.
I think very much though that, Jason, in terms of the simpler recycling route requirements, it really sort of clarifies about the segregation and the separation of that material going forward. Absolutely right in terms of the waste transfer notes, but I think this gives real clarity and consistency across not only households, but obviously across the business and the commercial sector as well, in terms of the types of recyclables that need to be segregated out, and obviously as well about where there are co-collection exemptions as well. So it provides real clarity for businesses to undertake this on a consistent basis.
Okay, thank you.
There was another question as well about space. What if businesses, especially city centre businesses, don't have room for these additional bins to segregate the different waste streams? Is there any guidance on that?
I think, Joe, in terms of that, it's very much that through part of the TEEP assessment that can be undertaken, as Aaron mentioned, undertaken by the waste collector. They can look at different options in terms of that. Is it technically feasible to collect that type of material? And obviously there may be different options in terms of collecting that material. It may not be a bin, it may be a sack collection, maybe a bag collection. Also as well, a bit of work that we are doing is looking at sort of shared provision. You know, how can businesses actually look at shared provision? I know that what Jason talked about previously was that sort of formal arrangement through a landlord or a facilities management company. But is there other ways that we can look at shared provision, particularly within a high street sort of street scene as well? Really to sort of, as you say, minimise the sort of street clutter, but provide those recycling services that are required by the businesses.
arguably as well, if you're not producing more waste, you're just segregating waste, aren't you? So you could operate with smaller bins and get rid of the larger bin, in theory.
Absolutely, Jason, and I think that's why the waste audit is so important. You know, if you're dealing with an 1100 bin and it's just for residual waste at this point in time, what is the composition of that material? You know, is it 80% paper and card? You know, is it 20% glass? You can really start to look at actually what the bin requirements are, and as you say, actually reduce down the volume overall potentially.
Somebody's asked if the resources are free, Bruce.
Yes, so the Business of Recycling website is free to access, and obviously it covers England, but there's also versions for Northern Ireland and Wales as well.
How would the EA stroke WRAP, I guess it'd be the EA, deal with a poor performer, by which, you know, they've got a recycling bin, they've got a black bin, but just nothing's happening. The segregation isn't happening.
I think in terms of that instance, it comes back to Aaron's slide, Jason, in terms of that sort of compliance route. Obviously, what you're looking for is obviously that sort of intelligence sort of led enforcement, and it has to be proportionate. Obviously, it has to be within the public interest as well. And actually saying, well, actually, how can you create the improvement? Very much about being, enthusing the business to undertake this and really selling the benefits to the business of actually separating out recyclables, as I say, from a cost and a reputational point of view. Obviously, the last thing that any of us want to do is move into that sort of enforcement space. That's the last area that we want to go into. And very much the business of recycling is very much designed round about the encouragement of the businesses in the first instance by raising that awareness, giving them the appropriate tools and resources. But clearly, we do need that sort of backstop in terms of actually having that enforcement approach for a business that just does not comply.
We've got a hand up, but I can't see the name of the person there. Would you like to, your name, you're called Dale. Would you like to speak?
I Jason. Yeah, it's Dale Metcalf at Middlesbrough Council. It's just building off the back of what you're sort of looking at there now, and what you've talked about is we already have like big problems with commercial premises, certainly in and around our town centre in Middlesbrough, around sort of having a fit and proper process in place to dispose of their refuse at the moment. And we're quite heavy-handed with our enforcement. We do serve the appropriate notices and give them time to sort of rectify that behaviour, but we have large sort of volumes of businesses that just fail to comply. And I suppose my concern at the moment is just listening to who's going to sort of take the lead on the recycling side of this. Is I'm sure Ian's the same in Durham, that I anticipate now that given the short period of time we've got to sort of do this piece of work, by March, is we're going to have large volumes of businesses that will not comply, with what the requirements are. And are the Environment Agency going to be sort of in a position to undertake the potential volume of work that is going to probably come their way? And is there a referral process into the Environment Agency that's going to be there for us as an authority, where we are going through certainly North Middlesbrough, where probably 30% of our town is sort of alleyways with commercial premises sort of keeping their containers in those alleyways. I can foresee it being a big problem for us as a local authority, hence why I asked around any sort of powers we could use, under duty of care legislation to take action.
Yeah, just on a...
Sorry,
do you want me to come in there, Bruce? Sorry.
Okay, thanks, son.
I was just going to say, so you asked if there was going to be any kind of mechanism to involve the Environment Agency. So there will be a reporting mechanism on the gov.uk website that will go live in March, so that kind of any party, so it could be a waste collector or a member of the public, can report non-compliance to the Environment Agency as a source of intelligence for them to investigate. And yeah, just to clarify my point before about the powers for local authorities. So I suppose a distinction I should have made is that obviously the local authority won't have powers to enforce against waste collectors or businesses that they don't serve as a customer, but you will have, as a waste collector yourself, you will have kind of certain power. I wouldn't say they're powers within any kind of legislation, but as a kind of like customer waste collector relationship, you do have kind of a kind of authority in that space to say like you're not complying, and you do need to take on these services. That kind of having those conversations.
It's quite difficult, isn't it? Because we take sort of a robust stance now against commercial entities that don't have fit and proper arrangements in place to dispose of their refuse, but we're sort of going. It's the same context, really. We're asking them to do exactly the same for their recycling, but the enforcement routes are two different sort of routes, if you like. And I think I am of the view, and I'm not expecting anybody to agree with me, is that you're sort of creating two strands. Whilst education is important, the process and legislation that's available to us now to sort of give businesses the chance to sort of put measures in place is there, but we're sort of splitting them off into two routes with two separate bodies. And I would have thought it'd been better for local authorities to be able to sort their localized issues out following that route. Is my view, but I accept
yeah,
what
it
you're
definitely
saying.
makes sense. I'll take that away to discuss with the environment agency and kind of my colleagues as well. Thanks for raising it.
There's a question here from Andrew Sheen, which says, will local authorities contact businesses directly to present their proposed frameworks? I guess that goes wider than just local authorities. It's because I do get the feeling that with the shortness of time for the implementation of this, there's going to be quite a scrabble from the likes of DEFRA and Veolia and Suez and the big nationals to sort of get a piece of this as well. And how will that happen? How will they present their proposals?
I think, Jason, from our perspective and what we've seen so far, obviously, as Aaron was highlighting, that there's obviously the trade bodies that are involved as well, and we're looking for them to cascade a lot of that information. Obviously, waste collectors as well will be starting to cascade that information, and I mean that both private sector collectors, but obviously also local authorities as well. So they'll start to get in contact with their customers about the necessary changes as well, and the requirements from the 31st of March 2025. So yeah, we would imagine that will start to roll out certainly from early in the new year.
There's another inquiry from a local authority asking if there's any resource available to help them start food waste collections from scratch.
No, there's no kind of funding offer to local authorities or private waste collectors in regard to the requirements for non-household municipal premises. Obviously, this is my part of the team, but I'm aware that there's kind of transitional food waste arrangements and funding that is being implemented on the household side, and there's no kind of restriction to. Oh, sorry, not looking for funding, just help and advice and guidance. So yeah, there will be advice and guidance on how to kind of implement the service, and we'll definitely be working with WRAP on that. I can't think of anything in particular to point to right now. I'm not sure if Bruce might have anything.
I was going to say that we'd designed a food waste business case. It was more tailored towards household collections, but certainly in terms of a number of the headings within that business case development document, they could be applied to non-household municipal waste as well. And obviously as well, just to say, if you're looking for any help, support or advice, I'm more than happy for you to reach out, and I can certainly put you into the contact with the right person and WRAP as well.
And there's another one here about organisations that have outward facing waste services, so the park scenario again, and the general public not playing ball and not putting the right waste in the right bin. What can an organisation do there who are trying their best, like doing their own environmental improvements internally, but dealing with general public?
Yeah, I feel like it's a kind of range of measures on a different kind of time horizon. So in the short term, obviously we've provided resources like things like posters that will hopefully help communicate how kind of customers and kind of the general public should use the bins correctly. But kind of in DEFRA, kind of in our broader team, are very much aware that like behaviour change required from citizens to engage with recycling properly is definitely an area that we need to work on, and we're currently doing a research project with social researchers to think about what other interventions we could do in this space to kind of shift the kind of behaviour of kind of the general public and how they engage with bins when they're out of the house, really.
Brilliant.
That's an issue that I see in the hospitals, and I see it in every sort of shopping centre that I go into. You know, people don't segregate,
For sure, yeah.
and don't take care to either. You know, so it is going to be an issue, definitely.
Yeah.
We've got a question here which says, where does responsibility sit with regard to your customers? As a local authority, we collect direct, we subcontract too, and we also have subcontractors who work for us, or businesses that we have no working relationship with and have never serviced the address. They just have contracts with other companies. Who do we have to take responsibility for?
Yeah, so you as a waste collector, you only have a responsibility for those that you provide a waste collection service, whether that's directly or subcontracted. So in that instance, your responsibility is to make sure that all your customers are aware of what waste they need to be presenting, and make sure that they are complying with the legislation. But yeah, as a local authority, you don't have any responsibilities to engage with businesses or other non-domestic premises that aren't your customers.
We've got the last one here. Okay. Food waste collection in a city centre environment using shared street bins suggests a massive increase in vermin. Is there any guidance on that?
I think in terms of any sort of practice in relation to food waste, it's obviously just about making sure that obviously there's appropriate containment. It's obviously secured in a bag. Yeah. Obviously that there's proper containment for that material so that there's no escape as well. And obviously, additionally to that as well, is ensuring that there's appropriate frequency of uplift as well. You know, that it's not sitting there for a prolonged period of time as well. So I suppose just that sort of general good practice that goes with those types of things as well.
Yeah, we have that at the hospital, the RBI and the Freeman, and we use wheelie bins, you know, with lids on. We don't see vermin in the bins. The seagulls try, but they get shy. You know, they struggle. And then frequency of collection is important as well. And I think there just will be an increase generally in food waste vehicles traveling the city centres, won't there? So
yeah, Jason, just coming back to your point earlier, just about you know, that education and awareness where you've got bins within, you know, a location such as a hospital, etc. as well. It was just to say that on the Business of Recycling website, some of the posters can be used for those types of facilities as well. So if you had like a fibre bin or a can bin, etc., there are posters that can be used, and absolutely appreciate, you know, it is about increasing that sort of education and awareness as we go forward as well.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any more questions? We're stunned silence.
If we are only responsible for our own customers, if we had a collection that was problematic logistically, we could simply cancel the contract and it's not a problem anymore. Seems questionable. That's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah, I suppose in the first instance, obviously, you would provide kind of advice and guidance and try and work with that problematic customer to, understand why they aren't engaging with the service, or if they're kind of contaminating the various bins, or kind of whatever the issue is, you would try and resolve it initially. But yeah, you're right, Adam, that if you don't want to engage with that customer, then it's within your right to cancel that contract. Although I know there are certain requirements for local authorities, kind of the supplier of last resort. So I don't know if that might conflict with that. But yeah, I mean, it is a tricky one to hopefully through advice and guidance, you're able to work with any problematic customers.
I know that is a concern for local authorities, is particularly, as we move into this, that the private sector can go in and cherry pick all the nice to have contracts, the easy to service or easier to service, and it's those remote contracts and maybe non-engaging businesses that it's will fall to local authorities to have to service, and given that they're not been given any more resource to pick that up, might be a challenge.
Yeah, because I think the question was around logistics as well. So if you're in the wilds of Northumberland and you need a food waste service, but you're miles from anyone else, and it's not even a bin's worth every week, someone's still got to come out there and pick it up, haven't they? And the commercials will say, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah. Jason, we'd received a number of inquiries from local authorities in relation to that as well, and it was very much about that the local authorities had that duty to arrange a collection. It may be that that's done directly through themselves and obviously charge accordingly, or again that they have that potential to perhaps sort of subcontract in that type of situation as well, if there was obviously a subcontractor that was willing to take on that business. But yeah, absolutely understand in terms of that will be done on probably a case-by-case basis by the local authorities, particularly with some rural business premises.
A couple of questions have just come in right towards the end here, and this one has puzzled me a little bit as well. This is Bob O'Connell. Isn't collecting glass commingled with other recyclables counterintuitive, as it contaminates the other potentially valuable content?
So I don't have the exact answer on that, but it would have been considered in our impact assessment. So I would have to defer to like our analytical and evidence team on that, and I'd be happy to follow up with an answer on that with Bob, if that's helpful.
I know a lot of this stuff goes through trommels, doesn't it? It gets beaten to death, and the glass is supposed to fall through. I know that, but it is as a hospital, we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't put glass in with mixed recycling. It's just a no.
And like I say, is we haven't so obviously the exemptions allow for glass to be co-collected, but we're not requiring glass to be co-collected. So a waste collector or local authority could choose to continue to separate glass for any reason.
And then a final question here: is there any support financial for businesses or premises to recycle their own food waste, i.e., hot composting in particular?
Yeah, so there's no funding available kind of within Simpler Recycling as a whole to businesses to kind of support compliance or anything like that. Obviously, I guess it would be for the individual business to do a kind of cost assessment to see if the cost of composting infrastructure on site would outweigh the ongoing cost of food collections, because that, like I said before, that is a compliant way of dealing with your food waste.
Thank you. It's probably time to wrap up, and I'm sure there are questions in the chat that I've missed that haven't been picked up, but the chat is open, and Aaron and Bruce will be able to pick up anything from that we feel hasn't been answered. So I think it's probably appropriate for us to wrap up at this point. Jo's nodding her head. She hasn't coughed in the last 5 minutes, so
it's time for a lemon sip.
So if that's the case, then I'm just going to say thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance, and please spread the message to the businesses that are around you to let them know that this is coming. because it is going to have an impact, and that there is that we're trying to help build the awareness, but it's it can feel a little bit like pushing water back uphill. We need to we need word to spread, and for people to sort of come to us, come to Waste Aware North East, and come to the North East Recycling Forum and ask us questions, and maybe we repeat this further down the line. Because it's been good exercise. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers,
All right,
bye.
have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.